it's only every other day, every third day that I
Mhm.
actually sit down knowing what I'm going to do and feeling enthusiastic. And it
Okay.
takes me a while to like warm up the gears, and sometimes it's a real struggle.
Welcome to Pajamas and Wrenches, the podcast where we share warm fuzzies for your creative well and cool tools for your creative challenges. I'm PJ Gardner Schweitzer, author of the Horace and Bunwinkle series and The Great Zudini from HarperCollins, and this is my partner in crime.
I'm Sarah Allen, and I am the author of 4 middle grade novels, including What Stars Are Made Of and the most recent Monster Tree, a spooky one.
Exciting. It's exciting.
You're going to talk to us about something that's been inspiring you. Yes, for our
So
warm fuzzies.
yes, for the warm fuzzies. So I don't know if I've talked about this before. Um, I what inspires me is music a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
So I will make playlists for certain stories or listen to certain soundtracks because they have the right vibe.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things that always inspires me, and I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast lately, is years ago when I started querying, so probably this was back in 2015, 2016, I created an encouragement playlist and I put all the
Ooh.
songs that make me feel good about myself on them, and just and give me like that oomph to keep going, right?
Yes.
So, and one of the songs I put on there was Don't Stop Believin' by Journey.
Yes.
And I highly recommend putting it on if anybody's listening, I'm putting it on a playlist because sometimes I'll just be driving around because Don't Stop Believin' still gets a fair amount of airplay, at least on the stations that this lady listens to. Um, so sometimes I'll just be driving or I'll be doing something and the song will play. And because I have conditioned it in my mind to be a positive, encouraging song, right? To be uplifting and give me hope,
Mhm.
it does always. And I always feel seen by the universe or God, whatever you call the higher being. I always feel seen and I always feel like I can do it. So, and it's
I love
happened.
that.
Yeah. So, and I tell everybody, I'm like, I encourage you to make an encouragement playlist for yourself, songs that always make you feel good, and to include songs that get airplay, after a while, because the
You're walking in the
random,
grocery store.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the randomness of it's just, and half the time, maybe more, you're not feeling down, but
Mhm.
you don't know how much better you can feel. Like it comes on and I'm like, it always makes me hopeful. Which is a good
That's
contrast
awesome.
because I've been listening to the Pan's Labyrinth soundtrack,
Oh
and then I
gosh.
was listening to this dark foresty thing to kind of get me in the mood for the current like works. And those do not feel encouraging. Those are bad soundtracks. And you're like, everything is so dark. So it's really nice to have something to contrast it with. So my encouragement playlist has been very, encouraging and or
Awesome.
inspiring, uplifting. And so that is what I like I said, I encourage everybody who's going to do hard things like publishing to have something.
Yeah. Have you ever, you talked about conditioning. Have you ever had like a song for a specific project that's like that does a really good job of getting you into the right headspace for that specific thing? And like,
Mhm.
how do you make that work for yourself?
So, so I have this story. I have a number of stories set in the forest. I have this idea. I want to redeem trees in children's
You
literature.
say to the girl who just published a book about a monster
The
tree.
monster tree, I know, and I'm like, I'm gonna my trees will be good and beneficial for my forest, which is funny because I've been in the forest enough to know that it gets creepy as heck out there sometimes. Right?
Yeah,
You're just like,
yeah,
like, it's like Snow White. The trees are scary and all this.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so there are a couple of songs that, oh, okay, totally different, totally different playlist. I have
Uh-huh,
a ton of playlists when I'm telling you. And usually I'll do it on YouTube or because I know YouTube is to me it's the easiest.
uh-huh.
but I get ads and there's so many political ads that
Yes.
I can't listen to anything on YouTube right now. So I'm like, well, I gotta have a different source of inspiration because it's too depressing otherwise. But so I have this one, okay, totally different story. I have this playlist for it. Um, and I don't know how to tell you that I don't know how to explain that the voice of the his name is Dermot Kennedy, and he's
Oh, I think I've heard some of this stuff.
right, he's Irish. Well, his like studio stuff sounds good, but his live stuff sounds amazing. There's always so
Wow.
much more emotion in it. So live, so he's got a number of songs in the Live Lounge, which is like a British, like a BBC thing. He does a cover of Anti-Hero by Taylor Swift, that song. He's got
Wow.
this very raw emotion. I can listen to that song, and like I said, I don't know how to explain that his voice is just perfect for the male POV in that story. So
Ooh.
as soon as I hear it, as soon as I hear it, I'm in that headspace. The
That's
Forest one I was
awesome.
talking about earlier, there's a couple of songs on there, and literally one called Forest by, I think the guy's name is Fancy Hargood. Where again, it's just so perfect to the emotion. And usually it's emotion based for me because that's kind of
Mhm.
the kind of writer I am. But sometimes if there's too many words, like I can't necessarily write to that
Mhm.
music, right? Sometimes I'll have to I put on a lot of like the Bridgerton stuff where it's
Nice.
the
I
pop
totally do that
song.
too. Like
I
film
love that.
soundtracks. Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite one from the Bridgerton one is Dancing on My Own. To me, that's one of
Oh.
the best like instrumental adaptations. Oh, that's so good. Anyway, so music is I find it very helpful to create the mood. Because I am an emotion-based writer, which I don't
Mhm.
think if you read my stuff, you'd necessarily go, oh, that's obvious. But like my drafting it's rooted in
Mhm.
emotion.
Mhm.
So that's why I think for me, music helps so much. Uh,
Have you ever had it where you can't get a character's voice right or you can't figure out the tone of the story until you have the right song to go with it?
okay, so that's interesting because I think I'm in that conundrum right now with a project.
Oh.
I was like, okay, what are you gonna do? And so I put on Pan's Labyrinth, and
Ah.
I was like, okay, but I think I'm not entirely sure it's the right soundtrack for it. So I listened to it, and it's the atmosphere of the world, but I don't know that it's her voice. So the
Oh,
character,
gotcha.
so
Gotcha.
that's which is funny. And I haven't found a show or anything or a movie right now. I mean, I think Pan's Labyrinth or City of Lost Children might help, but there's a vibe, and yes. So the
Uh-huh.
short
Uh-huh.
answer, Sarah, is yes, I have had difficulty until I find the song or that other thing that's, that show, that other book, that thing, right, that makes it click. And I
Uh-huh.
think I'm in that space right now. Or I have a voice and I need to know where to place it, and the music will help me place it, if that makes sense. It's kind of
Oh, absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely. I have that with all the time with like TV or movie characters where I can't wrap my head around who a character that I'm writing is. And then if I think watch the right show, I'm like, oh, they're this character and this character,
mhm.
or like,
Yeah,
okay, so it's this.
yeah.
Honestly, sometimes if I just cast it in my head, I was having the hardest time figuring out my villain in the book I'm writing. And
Hmm.
she's literally a supervillain, like with superpowers. And I was like, oh, it's Laura Linney. And then as soon as I knew it was Laura Linney, I
Hmm.
was like, okay, I know who she is now.
Isn't
Anyway,
that
so I get
funny?
that.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't do a lot of like Hollywood casting in my brain of stuff, but sometimes I do. And this is what I always say about writing. I'm like, books are like babies. They come to you with different personalities and different needs, right? And so you
Mhm.
think, oh, I've written a book. I know how to write. I've written 4 books. I know how to
Mhm.
write, right? I've written
Mhm.
it, right? I've written 10, right? And then you get one that comes along and you're like, why won't you do what the others did? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you're not. It's like a little octopus. It's like, nah. And and so you have to then rethink it. So So I think that's really like some stories do and some don't.
Uh-huh.
Some things do work in general though, like the music for me. But
Mhm.
it is that moment, and I think I can't continue with something, like I can't get into it until I have that aha moment, like you're
Mhm.
talking about, oh, you're this and this, or oh, because
Mhm.
I can come up with plot and that can be exciting, but if I do not have my character solid in my head, I'm like I can't write to figure out character, but I can write to figure out plot. If that
Yeah.
right, does
Yeah.
that yeah.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense. So yeah, my inspiration is generally musical, like but
That's
also
awesome.
just inspiring and and then also works to do those for exercise, although not to the same degree.
Yeah,
The
totally.
encouragement playlist. Anyway, all right. So that is my inspiration. Do you have any challenges you want to share with us, Sarah?
Yes, I do. And it's going to be I think this is probably going to sound very mundane, but I am just being honest here about this is what I have been challenged by the last few weeks. Is basically mundane interruptions of the writing time and the writing process,
Hmm.
both like emotionally, like just days when you're not feeling it, but then also like practically. So I've had the last month, I have been trying to finish this. I got a contract job for a 13,000 word chapter book that's due in next month.
Hmm.
And I've been trying to finish it, and it's not difficult. It's not like I outlined the story. It's an easy story. It's very, very in my lane. um, so it shouldn't be a problem. But this last month, I have had multiple visitors. I got sick.
Hmm.
Um, I'm in Florida and it's hurricane season. So there was a hurricane, like the biggest hurricane I've experienced in Florida. And then I had more visitors. And then, so my challenge and my question is how to keep the creative juices flowing and how to keep the words happening. How to just keep
Yeah.
going with all of that, like life happening, basically.
Well, okay, so this is funny because Sarah and I both are into Clifton Strengths. So,
Yes.
okay, so you're going to hear us probably use those terms from Clifton Strengths quite a bit. Um,
Yes.
so I'm going to say I'm high adaptability, right? But
Ah.
which means I'm highly adaptable,
So
basically.
you're a good person to advise on this.
So, my thing is, you and I both know those words are going to get written. You would like those words to get written methodically over time, so there's no
What?
stress, right? But sometimes, and this is really, really sort of I don't know. I mean, some people aren't like this, but I think most people are. Sometimes it's only the deadline also because it's,
Yeah.
I mean, like you can't control hurricanes are respecters of nothing and no one,
Yeah.
but people understand a deadline. And if you're like, look, I have a week, if you're like, look, I'm 2 weeks away from deadline, I can't, people will respect that. You respect it
Uh,
because, right, you've drawn that boundary and you're like, I'm terrible about boundaries. I really am. And especially with my kids. And then like I had a book due at the start of this month. And that I mean, I could draw boundaries real clear that last
yeah.
month. And the last 2 weeks, I was like, don't even talk to me. Like, there is absolutely no space in my brain for anything but this. Once this is
Yeah.
due, once this is in, I'm here for you, right? And they respected it, but also because I respected that boundary. So,
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, I would like to, and I know, are you someone who really needs consistency, or are you a pretty adaptable person as well, or?
Um, I think in terms of in strengths terminology, the adaptability I think is in the middle somewhere for me.
Okay, okay.
So I'm not completely inflexible, but I do thrive
On
on
consistency.
schedules and
Yeah.
consistency. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then,
And there's a neurodiversity
yeah,
element to that too. Like
yeah.
I I really like my structure.
You know what, then
But yeah.
don't you think then the answer is, look, then you just say now, because it's due what you said next month, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, so now if structure is what you need, now you're close enough to the deadline that, and again, hurricanes don't care. So
Yeah.
that you're just going to have to roll with, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you do write by hand. So as long as you have lanterns, you could technically,
I literally thought of that during this
right?
hurricane, and luckily my power didn't go out for more than like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But I did think about that. I was like, well, I've got candles and my pen and my notebook, so I'm good,
And
theoretically.
if that provides the stability you need, because I just everybody's process is different, and I'm a big respecter of process. It can be weird as heck. I don't care if you get it, if you're that's how you write, and it can be really whatever, like rigid
Mm-hmm.
as well. However your process is or whatever it is. I'd say try and get back to it. I mean, my advice on that is create now one with really reasonable goals if you can, so
Mm-hmm.
that you know what I mean, so that you can also absorb a day where maybe something just comes up that you don't have control over. But
Right.
like my inclination would be like, you know what? Past is the past. You can't go back and get the writing done then. So now you
Yeah.
only can move forward with what you've got. That's kind of
Yeah.
like my, and as we were talking about earlier, I'm a big believer in planning. I never stick with a plan. I rarely find I can stick with a plan. Something always comes up, but it feels good to make the plan. And
Totally.
I think if you're really reasonable in your plan, because the thing is, I don't know, because I know some people you make a plan and then it's like you have to stick to the plan, right? Some people are like, I have to, or now I don't feel okay. If that's how you're at, that's where I'm like super, super reasonable plan. It's all about like your expectations, right? If you're
Right.
expecting to get 3,000 words written in a day and you get 300, you've failed. Right. If you expected to get 200 words written today and you got 300, you succeeded.
Which is
Right.
about what I that is about my stamina like of the day. It's about 500 words.
And
But yeah.
and you know what? And I say this all the time. 500 words a day, if you wrote every day would be like what? It's like 180 some thousand words, right? In
Hmm.
a year.
Hmm.
That's 2 to 3 books, depending on the size of the book, right?
Hmm.
Small but mighty. 500 words a
Yes.
day gets things written. And kudos to people. I don't want to say kudos because I just think it's an innate skill who can write thousands of words a day. And I'm like, which is, I mean, I want to like,
Insanity.
right. And I don't want to minimize it either, but if that's not something you're normally capable of, you're going to hit
Right.
those milestones periodically because you'll have to, right? Sometimes you're like,
Right.
wow, I wrote 3,000 words today. That's more than I wrote the last 3 weeks. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if that's just not your standard, there's nothing wrong with that. Like
Right.
fast writing is its own skill set,
Right.
and some
Right.
people are just born with that skill set, like with that skill, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I
And I
know.
really like the idea. I think my natural tendencies is to not be very good about my own like prioritizing my own time, these kind of things. And
Hmm.
it's not even begrudgingly. Like I'm a huge FOMO person. So when fun things are happening, like I hate missing out on that kind of stuff. Um, but here's my follow-up question because I
Okay.
feel like that's like that the outer layer of the onion that I need to like
Okay.
be better at like the external stuff. Like obviously you're right, like hurricanes are gonna hurricane. But within reason, I can be better at like structuring that and like
Hmm.
and enlisting other people's help like
Yeah.
around me.
Yeah.
But within that, um, more of like an internal problem, I think.
Okay.
Do you have strategies for like if we've got all that the system set up,
Hmm.
you know the structure of like okay, I sit down to write at this time. I It's only every other day, every third day that I actually sit down knowing what I'm going to do and feeling enthusiastic. And it
Okay.
takes me a while to like warm up the gears and sometimes it's a real struggle. So what are your strategies for like making the most of the times when you have set everything up so you can have your writing time
Hmm.
for when life isn't getting in the way? How do you take advantage of that? How do you like hit the ground running?
So one of the things that is real, I have to get out of my house. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I am very bogged down by my house. And sometimes I can't, like I have a table, that's where I do most of my writing, but it's in my front room. It
Mm-hmm.
just wound up being because where my writing space was, it gets so hot during the summer. And
Mm-hmm.
then I was taking stuff up and down, and I finally was like, I'm just gonna settle out here. Well, I'm available to everybody if I'm at that
Right,
table.
right, right.
Um, so I have to get out of the house. Also, it's code in my brain for, especially if I'm going to buy like a coffee or something, and I'm like, well, you spent money on this, so you better work. Like, you've got to
Make it worth
and
it.
yeah. But for one, I have to get out of the house. When I can't get out of the house, I sprinting with other people, because let's face it,
Mhm.
not everybody is intrinsically motivated. In fact, probably not that many people are just motivated from within, right?
Mhm, mhm,
Most of us, and even at times, it's, like the accountability of another person, right?
mhm, mhm.
Um, there's a lot that we have to force ourselves to do as it is. Like I don't think anyone should be beating themselves up because they're not inherently motivated, even though we love
Right.
this, right? Or
Yeah.
you can't. So I'm a big believer in getting out of the house, which I need to do more than I am. I'm I'm a big I've heard a lot of people talk about like having like a process, right?
Mhm, mhm,
That gets you into writing a certain song, I know sometimes like writing out like morning pages style.
mhm, mhm,
Like you sit down and you just clear your head of everything.
mhm.
Um, I
Lighting a certain candle. I've
Yeah,
heard that
right.
one.
They're like, oh, this scent then always makes me feel like working, and it's that project.
Yeah. It
My
almost
son,
makes me think of the process like an NBA player has their thing before free
mhm,
throws, like
yeah,
they do their exact same ritual.
absolutely, like a pre-writing ritual. And
Yeah.
if you're spiritual, it can be prayer, or
Hmm.
some form of prayer. You know what I mean? It could
Hmm.
be, I don't know,
I like that.
tarot if you do that right. You can have that pre-writing ritual that leads directly into it. But Sarah, I'm going to be honest. I think sometimes the answer is you just grit your teeth,
Yeah.
and you force yourself, like you make yourself open the document or pull it up on the screen if it's already open, and then you just force yourself to write a sentence,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
then you go, okay, I think I can do another sentence, and then
Yeah.
I mean, I think sadly, and I hate that this is the answer, because I'd like a magic pill, bullet,
Yeah.
anything, right? But I do think sometimes the answer is it's just gritting your teeth and doing it. Like,
Mhm, mhm.
it's
And the frustrating but also kind of wonderful mundane truth of that is that not hearing you say this,
Mhm.
because I am asking this question wanting the magic answer, right? Like I want to be able to sit down and be motivated every single time and it's just a wonderful writing session. But the actuality is that once I've done, now that I'm thinking through it, once
Mhm.
I've done what you're saying and I've sat down and I've struggled, pulled teeth through those first two or three paragraphs,
Mhm.
the sucky but good truth is that it actually helps and that it
Yeah.
does start flowing. And it's kind of like priming the pump where it's like, okay, but like 80-90% of the time, it gets better. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I can manage the next three paragraphs a little easier than I did the
Yeah.
first three.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some stuff that helps too, is this is some of the stuff I do. I'll set a timer. I have like a little egg timer type thing, and I'll
Mhm.
set it for a certain amount. And then I am not a math person, but for
A
some,
little penguin timer.
right, I know. Mine is much more mundane. It's like a digital one, but so you've got the timer, right? I don't love doing math, but I love adding up the words that I've added. So a
Mhm.
lot of times then I'll do it in 30-minute, 20-minute increments or whatever. And then I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, look, and I always get faster. Like
Oh,
the first,
interesting.
and it's encouraging. The first section is, I'm always like, wow, I'm never going to finish another book. This is the slowest anyone's ever written anything. And then the next one will get a little faster, and then the next one will get a little faster. And I'll find that just over time, and this was painful. I did a little a test. I'm only writing about 125-minute words per 30 minutes. So that's not much.
Hey, that's 125 words more than you had. before those 30 minutes.
But when you think about it, then an hour is 250. So it's a page an hour or an hour per page, however you want to do that, right? And then I'm like, if you needed to write 5 pages, you're like, okay, that's 5 hours. And you're like, okay, that's a lot. Maybe I don't need to write 5 pages today. Maybe, right? And but I also figured out working a certain amount of hours a day with 125 or 250 words per hour, let's say. And it actually is faster. Like it does wind up being more than that, but like that's kind of my slowest, right? Um, I was like, you can easily write 2 to 3 books this year. I mean, it's really like I was really like, you are looking for these mighty, like oaks or whatever, but you are starting with an acorn. You will get the oak. The oak always comes from this. You don't
Yeah.
start with it necessarily. I don't know if
Yeah.
that analogy or metaphor made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I do think, and I do think it's okay. Like, I think we beat ourselves up a lot, so much because we're like, but I love this. Why am I not doing it? And I'm like, well, it is still work. And one of my favorites is when people are like, I read your book like in an evening. And you're like, I love that. That's also sad. It took me a solid year to write that book, right?
Yeah.
Like, I am so happy that you loved it. That makes me feel great, but it also makes me feel sad.
Yeah.
Um, but
Uh,
I think that I just think that speed is praised a lot, and it is not natural for many, many writers and many
Agreed.
creatives, period. Because you're like, we've talked about writing, but I think a lot of this would apply to like making art, like sculpting, any of that. Speed is praised, but the truth is not everybody can go fast.
Yeah.
We all have our natural pace,
And with AI now, the humanity is in the slowness now, I think, in a lot of ways.
I think so too. I think so too. And again, no one should tell you how to write a book. Now, there are certain things we want in books, like periods, like punctuation and capitals. That is always necessary. But everybody's process is legitimate, as long as you are doing it. I mean, obviously you
Right.
and I are not going to be like, hey, yeah, have AI write your book for you.
No.
We're not going to advocate for that. But also, I don't think anyone is truly satisfied with something that they put their name on that
That
they
I
did
didn't really make.
actually make. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so all right. Well, so do you want to talk
Well,
about
thank
challenges
you.
more? Okay. I don't even
No, that was super helpful and good reminders and good encouragement. We can do
yeah.
this.
I do, and one of the things I do want to say about this is you're not broken. You're not
Right.
broken. Even when we're in burnout, we're not
Right.
broken. We're
Mhm.
we're in burnout, and that's something specific where we just need to heal, right? You need
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
rest, and rest is really important.
Yes.
And that's another thing. Okay, so are we done with challenges? But I do want to add this. I think it's really important to take at least one day off a week,
Agreed.
you
Mhm.
know, and that's from everything, you know what I mean? Like, which is
Yes.
much easier said than done. And sometimes it's fun to be creative. And I'm like, absolutely do that if you want to, but you should give yourself a day where you don't have to, right?
Mhm. Mhm. I agree.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'm doing resources, right?
Yes.
Okay,
What is our
so
resource of the week?
so I checked this book out from the library. It's so good, I am now going to go buy it. It's
Ooh.
called Feel Good Productivity: How to Do More of What Matters to You, excuse me, by
Ooh.
Ali Abdal. It's got 2 A's after that, Abdal. Anyway, it is really, and I know you'd love this, Sarah. I know
Okay.
because it is an absolute, it's so reassuring. And one of the things they're like, yeah, it turns out that when you feel good, you're more productive. They're like, who knew?
Hey.
You're more creative, you're happier, you're all these things. And you go, that's like a well duh. But but so it's available in on basically anywhere you can get books. I really liked it just made me feel, hold on, let me see if I can go back to the one of the okay. It just says positive emotions are the fuel that drives the engine of human flourishing.
Ooh.
Right? It's so encouraging. So and
Give us
it's
the title again.
It is called Feel Good. Shoot, now I gotta go back to the Feel Good Productivity: How to Do
Okay.
More of What Matters to You by Ali, Ali, Abdal, Abdal.
Awesome. That sounds
Really
amazing.
good. It's good. And I knew you'd like it too, because when you open something, it was recommended to me and I was like, eh. And then I was like, oh no, this is it. That's why now I gotta go buy it.
Nice. Very
All
good.
right. So, and then Sarah, what are your words of wisdom you want to share with us this week?
Yes, parting words of wisdom. I have been diving into poems lately. I have a newsletter, sarahallendale.substack.com. Should I go subscribe? Um, but I've one of the newsletters for that, I was collecting poems for people who don't like poetry. And so I've had a really good time diving into poems lately. And there's one of them that has stuck with me for years, and I just discovered it again. And I feel like it's a perfect poem for encapsulating that mix of frustration and wonder about the creative process, that it is so frustrating and so wonderful. And the poem is called Beauty is a Real Thing. I've Seen It by Jay Hopler. And it goes like this. If only those parakeets would settle a little nearer to where I'm sitting, instead of at the tops of far off trees, this morning would be so much more remarkable. One could watch the blackbirds, I suppose, peck their ways like Oxford dawns across the flagstone paths and lawns, or the swallows, or the sparrows, or the crows. But those birds are so plain, so painfully available. No, only those parakeets will do, and they will not do what I want them to. In this, they are like everything else in the world, every beautiful thing. And there we go. Jay Hopler, he's amazing.
I love that. Yeah. No, that actually feels very much like the writing process.
Doesn't it?
The
Those dang
creative process.
parakeets.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that is really good. Yeah. I love poetry. Poetry is just so inspiring. So,
It's good.
well,
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and I hope that some of your wells have been filled and challenges have you've been given tools to overcome some of those. And I wish you a successful week of writing.
absolutely. Thanks for joining us.